welcome to the show, guys. Hi there, business owners, directors, and marketeers. In today's show, I'm meeting Ben Goldstein from Nutshell. I'm Lucas, your host as always, and I want to tell you a little bit about Ben because he brings a very unique angle to this show today. So Ben is a content marketing manager at Nutshell, which is a leading CRM and sales automation platform based in Ann Arbor in Michigan. And we're going to really talk about something very interesting. He had some very great findings in his work, and we're going to talk all about that. So he has been working on the blog for the last 3 years and has been basically creating the blog to be a super efficient channel for the product and for the team there. So we're going to talk all about this today. So Ben, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on, Lucas. Thanks for that introduction. Very thoughtful. I appreciate that.
Very good. So Ben, tell me at first a little bit about Nutshell. What is it all about?
Sure. So Nutshell is a CRM and sales automation platform that helps sales teams close more deals. As simple as that. In case anyone who's listening to this or watching this is unfamiliar with CRM as a category, CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. It's a software that acts as a central database for everyone in your company for your sales contacts and conversations. And it also helps you work sales leads through a pipeline from your first touch to the moment you close the deal and beyond. We've been around in Ann Arbor for about 10 years now. And the product was originally designed as an easy-to-use alternative to the more complex enterprise CRM solutions that were out there at the time. And these days we're a top 10 in everything from sales process automation to sales reporting and lead management. And we like to say that Nutshell is simple enough for any user, but powerful enough for any team.
Very cool. I like that saying there. So who would be the typical type of user? Is that a certain category of businesses? Is that certain size of teams? Like what would be the average, guys that are using the product?
Yeah, B2B sales teams in general would find the most benefit from Nutshell. So sales reps and their managers. And that's kind of regardless of the product they sell or even the size of their business or how they sell. Nutshell is a very flexible, customizable piece of software that can fit any process. And what's really cool about it, it actually helps you discover your sales process and define it and then provide your sellers with the guidance throughout that sales process so that everyone's activity is consistent and measurable. So I'd say if you're sort of a new business, a startup, for one thing, if you've never defined your sales process before, and even companies that have been around for a long time and are larger have never formally defined their sales process before, and everyone on your sales team is sort of playing it by ear, these are the teams that tend to benefit from Nutshell the most. And also, if your sales team or customer base is growing really rapidly, you'll also find a lot of value from Nutshell because we offer unlimited contacts and data storage, and our technical support team offers training to help teams along. And that's all at no additional charge. None of that. That's all included in every subscription for every member, not just admins. So growing teams, if you haven't defined your sales process before, these are the specifically the B2B sales teams that get the most value out of Nutshell.
Very cool, guys. So guys, if you're falling into that category, hop on the blog, get yourself inspired, and then try the product. Very cool. So CRM is obviously a crowded space, right? So there's been tons of CRMs out there. And I would love to speak with you about today how you've been building up the blog and how you've been really creating the blog to be an efficient and also cost-efficient driver of generating leads for the company. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about, a rough outline of the story. You started on the blog a while ago with 2,000 visitors. I've read that in one of your posts, and now it's about 45,000 monthly page views. 2,000 page views, and now you got 45,000 monthly page views. Maybe tell me a little bit about the beginnings. Like, what was it like to get started, especially having this, crowded marketplace in front of you?
Yeah, and I only put those page view numbers because they're the biggest numbers. That's the sort of vanity metric. It was about 1,000 visitors to the blog every month. And then we've taken that up to about 35,000 or more 3 years, from October 2016, October of 2019. And when I first started at Nutshell back in fall of 2016, there had been tentative attempts at a blog strategy, but for the most part, it was a really wide open field. There was no defined strategy or consistency to the posts. Like any other upcoming CRM or SaaS product organization, we had some product updates on the blog, some articles about our company culture, a few like 5 tips on whatever kind of listicles. And, collectively that content was drawing, as you said, about 2,000 page views a month. And we had one ebook at the time that was also maybe like you could count the number of downloads on 2 hands. Mm-hmm. So my task at the time was not just to improve the quality and consistency of that marketing content we were putting out, but also improve the focus as well. the original idea back then was like, let's just make this the most helpful blog as possible for B2B sales reps, because those were the people that formed the majority of our user base, right?
Yep,
But
yep.
what we sort of learned along the way was that, well, a couple things. First of all, you need to speak to sales managers as well, because they have this sort of outsized influence of what kind of software tools their teams are using.
Yep.
And then also, like, the occasional content we put out on marketing for marketers, that was actually doing really well as well. So it's been interesting over the years that we started with this sort of like hodgepodge grab bag of content that we laser focused on the reps. And once we started seeing the data from Google Analytics, we've now pulled back again to speak to, several different personas who might actually use our product. And that's just something you learn over time, looking at traffic numbers and which posts and which resources do well. You start with a plan, and then Google Analytics tells you if that plan was valid enough, and then you just have to adjust from there.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. So before we dive into the nitty and gritty and learnings from there, I would have maybe one question to sort of put that a little bit into perspective. So we have the blog for Nutshell. What would be, like, say, if you're aware of that, what would be typical user journeys on how people would usually find a Nutshell and get started? So the blog, obviously, with content is one way. Is that, maybe if you could put that a little bit into perspective?
Well, I can certainly speak to the blog, which is over 95% of the visitors and readers come to us through search. Yep. And, we've seen our organic search traffic for the entire site be sort of buoyed by that increased monthly gains in organic search to the blog. Outside of that, as far as how customers find us, and generally speaking, we're 100% inbound operation. So it's not just SEO, but it's also, Google keyword ads that we invest money in. Occasionally we'll, throw money at Facebook or YouTube to spread brand awareness and get people coming into the site. But essentially, everybody sort of comes to us and makes the first move, and then we, whether they're contacting sales, downloading content, starting a free trial, which we hope they do, then that's when the sales conversation starts. But so much of it is just driven by SEO and people, making search queries to solve problems of organization in their team, and why are my sales activities not efficient? And then they hopefully a lot of them do every month land on Nutshell, and we start to talk to them from there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What I would be curious then to talk about a little bit before we jumping into the learnings, just also so how you as an individual has been thinking about that when you started that blog, right? Sales and sales management and CRMs, these are obviously ideas and topics where there is a lot written on it on the internet, right? A lot of companies are sort of posting it. What was your personal mindset, your frame of mind when you're starting to create unique content in that space? Like, was it, a feel of challenging? Well, like, I would just be curious how you were looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, unique, you said the word there, and that's really it. If you're not prepared to create something unique, and if you're not prepared to put in the weeks and the months it takes to create the most definitive piece of content around a given topic, you're not going to capture attention. I am not a analytics metrics driven person. I come from an entertainment journalism background, yep. Whereas entertaining the reader, bringing an enjoyable experience to the reader was my only priority, and it's still my first priority today. I know there's a lot of ways you can optimize your content for search, but if you're not giving the reader a really valuable, entertaining experience, they're not going to take action, and they're not going to come back and keep reading the other things you do. So to answer the question, like, the goal was to create the most enjoyable, helpful, educational experience for sales reps who are looking for information. And at the time, 3 years ago, I only think there was a handful of people doing it well. Now the competition is a little more crowded in the year 2019, but at the time I really thought only the HubSpot sales blog was really nailing it. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I think we could be the second best blog out there for sales reps. We just need to, put a little effort into it. And I feel like at this point we do it better than anybody. Our content, I would stack it up against any SaaS company, any CRM, no matter how many people they have on their team, how well funded they are, we really put in the care and effort to create unique experiences for readers.
Yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, so I would love to now dive a little bit into the experiences that you've made in those 3 years, because there was a post recently that you put out there which sort of highlighted 3 to 4 things that moved the needle and 3 to 4 things that really did not move the needle. And I would like to ask and question you and maybe challenge you a little bit on both of them and see what your actual experience has been looking like. So I think it was a super interesting post. So you mentioned, maybe we focus on the one that didn't move the needle so much at the very beginning. So you mentioned the social media posts from your brand channels, and I maybe would put that also maybe connecting that a little bit to the blog articles on the regular schedule. You said they're publishing blog articles on a regular schedule, would not really move the needle in that sense. I would love to understand your thinking behind that, because common sense would be, we have to put out some blog articles to get the guys on our side. So maybe you could explain and discover and share a little bit what's your thinking there.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with the posting on a regular schedule, because I know that is sort of controversial to people. And I think it's because a lot of content marketers, their bosses expect them to publish, and they want to see that activity that's happening on the site. But everybody else in the world, in our market, who has not heard of your brand before, they don't care. They're not expecting your next blog article, and you sort of have to work behind the scenes. I've heard the other side of this, where it's like, well, we post regularly, and that sort of builds the muscle, so to speak, and then we have a lot of bites at the apple, as my boss Mike Carroll would say, but we have a lot of swings at the bat, and then we can see what's actually taking off and what isn't. But I personally think, especially if you have a small team, it's much more efficient to spend your resources making the most definitive piece of content for the specific keyword that you're trying to rank for. You do your research, you see what else is out there ranking above you for certain phrases, for certain topics, you study them, and then you make a piece of content that's better. And like I said before, that can take weeks, that can take months. And if you're putting yourself on a cadence where you're like, well, I'm the only writer, I'm going to publish something every week. Well, you think about what output can I make in a week? And that's the kind of size and quality level of the post you're going to put out every week. If you have a small team and you say we're going to publish 3 times a week, it's the same thing. It's whatever capacity you have is going to very much define the kind of content you put out. And what I'm saying is, forget all that. Nobody out in the market cares how much you're publishing. You really have to focus all your efforts on making the greatest things possible that are going to make an impact for the reader and compel a site visitor to take action. And that has very little to do with cadence. So all I would say to anybody listening to this is, like, you have your cadence. How has it helped you? Look at the metrics. How is it actually? Is there any correlation to find to how often you post and the gains in your traffic? And a super controversial thing is that if you have, as we do after 3 years, if you have a good backlog and library of content, you can take a couple months off from publishing and spend all your focus on optimizing old posts, finding new channels to get that content in front of, making backlink relationships, and your organic traffic is still going to go up and up and up. So I just want to get newer content marketers away from this idea of, like, first thing we got to do is publish on a cadence, because it's a very low priority. It's quality first, and then look, quality content gets you to the starting line. It doesn't win you the race. You make that quality content first, and then you spend so much effort into making sure it's discovery. You focus on that path of discovery, not just publishing on a schedule.
Yep, very, very cool. Maybe you can go one step deeper there and explain a little bit about how you sort of immerse yourself in those new topics that you're bringing up. What is the kind of things that we should imagine you to do if you're researching a new article and finding that unique edge to an article? What is the type of activities you would be doing?
Well, I think there needs to be a good balance between SEO focused posts. Like, you have a number of keywords. You can use a tool like SEMrush to help you find a bunch of relevant keywords that will help drive relevant traffic to your site, whether that's your product category, the specific questions that your customers are asking that may be sort of peripheral to that. And you can use the SEO tools to find those keywords and then build great pieces of content around that. But you also have to just write things that inspire and delight and educate your target reader. And I find that it has been helpful to sort of flop between those two things. It keeps us balanced. One type of post that we've seen, after 3 years, we know what can drive traffic to nutshell.com. And one post that just gets us, replies to our newsletter saying, that was really awesome. That was a great article. You made me laugh. Switching back and forth between these two content types has worked well for us, and it could probably work well for you.
Very, very cool. Nice. You also mentioned a couple of things there. Since you're mentioning that worked really well for you, I would like to sort of like focus now a little bit on the things that have been working really, really well in the last 3 years and that really moved the needle. So you mentioned there doing just, the ground of work off the page, right? We're going to jump into that. You mentioned publishing mid and low funnel content. You mentioned collaborating with visual brand designers, and you mentioned also, finding the right third-party channel. So maybe if you could walk us a little bit through this, how you would sort of order them for you, what types of activities you would have done. Maybe we can go one by one through them.
Okay. I made that LinkedIn post because I was so inspired by what happened with our SEO achievement in increasing our domain authority. And this was something that our content associate, Jack Virag, was working on for months. And he was reaching out to high domain authority sites and swapping backlinks, and he was making all the right moves, but it just wasn't happening. And it was sort of frustrating to him because it's like, I'm not seeing the lift in traffic from all this effort I'm doing. But then just one day, the site authority or the domain authority from Nutshell jumped from 49 to 51. That's it, 2 points. And that day we saw over 10% bump in our organic search visit. We just hit a new plateau immediately. Wow. So I was really excited about that. And this is one of those things that's just like, it takes a ton of effort building relationships with other content marketers, other business and news outlets, however you're going to get in front of your people. And as long as they're prominent websites, making that sort of quid pro quo trade of backlinks. And I'll just throw in, like, this was something I had to learn along the way, because 3 years ago, I would have people email me and say, hey, Ben, I see you're leading content at Nutshell. Could you look at this infographic I just made? Maybe you can link to this. And I'd be like, delete, ignore. Like, I don't care about your silly infographic. And then like a switch flipped, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, I linked to that, then you link to me, and then that's how our sort of SEO domain authority grows together. Okay, I just sort of get out of my own head. This is one of the weird things I used to learn on the job. But I'm sure there's a couple people out there who are like, delete no, I'm not going to link back to you. Whatever. You have to care about that stuff. And every time someone asks you for something, you ask for something back. And that's actually had a really good impact for us.
Very cool.
So yeah, I would actually put that. It was at the top of my mind. I'm not sure I would put it at number one, but it's certainly something I've been excited about lately.
Very cool. So what I'm taking from this is like, even though it doesn't show the immediate results, like keep on doing the work, like the work that Jack was doing there, as you mentioned, that at some point there's going to be a payoff point. Really cool. The one thing that you also mentioned there was the publishing of the mid-low funnel content that specifically compares to your competitors. Obviously, more and more SaaS companies are doing this. You have like comparison items on the page. What's your thinking about this, and what's a good way to approach this in your eyes?
I mean, there's a lot of schools of thought here about how you treat your competitors when you're creating content. And, some people say never say a bad word about them. Other people will say if they're treating their customers poorly or not delivering what they say, trash them. And what we found is certainly on the blog, it's, we've published a few things that are more pointed, specifically at Salesforce, and you can look up those in our blog. But like, for the most part, it's not going to make you look good if you say we're the best and all these people are eating our dust or whatever it is. Treat it honestly. These are the honestly best points of our product. These are our weak points. This is how so and so stacks up against us. Because what you're doing is you're educating, you're becoming an honest broker, you're becoming a trusted advisor. And that sort of thing, as we've seen through metrics and analytics concretely, has absolutely helped us. Those are not just the most highly trafficked pages, but more importantly, they're the ones that convert the most site visitors to trial signups. They're creating the most SQLs, the most actual sales leads. And I was just sharing this with another one of my friends on LinkedIn too, because he was asking about the same thing. And I just sent him our top 4 competitive pages of the sort of thing we're talking about. And it was like best CRMs for marketing, best CRMs for email, best CRMs if you're looking for a high-rise alternative because they were, going out of business a while ago. I sent them these four articles, and I said, these have produced the most sales leads for us of any blog topic, any of our blog articles. It was something like 63 leads over the last 30 days. And just crunching our own internal numbers about our conversion rate, our lifetime customer value, that was about $25,000 in new revenue from 4 old blog posts in 1 month. And that's every single month. So it's something I got really excited about, and it's just one of those things where like you publish enough things long enough, you see what's actually not just drawing people into the site, but making them take action, making them try your software or your product, whatever you're selling. And honesty is the best policy.
Very, very, very cool. I would have maybe one last question on those sort of points that worked really well before we maybe sort of slowly coming to an end and learning a little bit about how your personal journey was in all of this. You mentioned also the point of finding the right third-party channels to get in front of, right? To get your brand name out there, and to get some team members, I think Jeffrey and Jeb, that will be working on that. Could you just elaborate a little bit? Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, yeah, just because, like any other marketing team, we've tried things that didn't work, and we've sponsored podcasts that didn't really turn into anything measurable in terms of new customers. We've, sponsored events and a lot of different things, and that can get discouraging. And again, it's another thing where you just kind of have to keep trying until you get it right. And finally, at the beginning of this year, we started thinking like we just need to get our names out in front of more B2B sales teams, more reps, more managers. How do we do that? And of course, there's a handful of really great sales newsletters led by influencers like you mentioned, Jeffrey Gitomer, Jeb Blount. There's 100 others, but just a handful of really good ones. And we thought, well, let's spend a few $1,000s and sponsor their content in a way that's not just try Nutshell. What else can we do that's a little smarter than that? And what we started doing was offering our best content resources in these newsletters. You click this nice banner, which is designed by our brand designer. So like the look of it absolutely matters. And then people, come to our site, fill out that form, get our excellent content resource, and now they're on our marketing list. And that has been an incredibly efficient process for it as well. We ended up paying, I haven't crunched the numbers in a while, but it was only about like $4 to $6 for a very relevant email address that we can keep marketing to. And we put that up against anything else that we've tried in the past. This has just like been a massive ROI for us.
Very clear.
Yeah.
And that's email newsletters you're saying, right? Just to get that right.
Those are other people's email newsletters, Sales Caffeine, Sales Gravy. Those are the two we were focusing on this year, but there's a ton of other ones. You just, Google and find the newsletters that are most relevant to your prospective customers, and then just reach out to them and have that conversation. Like, what is it going to take in terms of a dollar spend to get me on a series of newsletters? And of course, this is obviously the important key, I'm going to provide something of real value to your readers so that it sort of benefits everybody involved.
Very cool. Yeah, so slowly switching context a little bit, I would like to learn a little bit about from you personally, and maybe a couple of last questions there, because we're slowly approaching the end of the interview. What would you say to somebody who's just starting out with content for their company, right? It can be very daunting that there is, a lot of strong competitors out there. What's the right mindset to take on when you're starting that journey? Because we're speaking about a 3-year time frame here that you were describing. What's a good mindset to take on as a content creator or as a team that is creating content, starting off that journey?
Yeah, I think this goes back to what I was saying before about really focusing on unique and valuable and better than what's out there. Your content's not going to be discovered if you just publish it and it's the same thing as everybody else's. That's the same topic has been done in the same way a million times before. You can certainly pay for eyeballs on that content, and some people do. They'll promote it on LinkedIn or whatever. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about organic content that you kind of you put it out into the world, and it sort of drives value and revenue for you almost forever, right? So what's encouraging to me is that just like marketing teams no longer, for the most part, have to convince their bosses of the value of content marketing. Like so many other companies out there have made it obvious. There's been a lot of research and case studies and statistics proving out the potential value of content. But again, I harp on it a million times, you can't just start cranking out blog posts that have been done the same way by 100 other companies and expect anything to happen. You can only win that game through sustained effort and real relevance. Again, you have to treat off-page SEO like a second job, or have someone else in there helping you, doing outreach to those high-profile outlets. And the real point is, if you only have the time and capacity to create content and that's it, you're not going to beat that champion brand that had a 7-year head start on you. We started out, we had to steal eyeballs from HubSpot and Salesforce. It's a really hard game. And just publishing content doesn't win you that game. It's finding that path of discovery through testing and failing 100 times and finding those channels that actually work for you and then focusing on those channels.
Really, really cool, Ben. And maybe one last question to sort of wrap up the interview. This has been super exciting, and to get a bit more context in how you're thinking about all of this as the sort of leading head in that mix that you were describing. My question would be, if you would be zooming back 3 years, or maybe even a little bit more, when you started to work at Nutshell, get the responsibility to run the blog, what would be one piece of advice that you would give yourself to, start the journey?
Sure. So this is a common phrase, but when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? So I'm a writer and editor. That's not just what I am by profession. Like, that's a huge part of how I define myself as a human being. And what I learned the hard way, again, is just that writing and publishing isn't the answer to everything. It's why a lot of content marketers feel like they're just spinning their wheels. They're not getting anywhere because they're just focusing on publishing and producing and publishing on a cadence, as we were speaking to before. And that's just one piece of how you capture attention out there. It's everything else that I mentioned. And early in my career, I didn't know this stuff. And I also didn't care about it. And for a long time, I didn't have to. 2 jobs ago, before I got into content marketing, I grew a mixed martial arts blog from 0 to 5 million monthly page views. And I did that without knowing a single thing about SEO, which is sort of like weirdly impressive looking back. But as the years went by, as I was running the site, my search visits started slipping. Facebook, 2012, 2014, they started throttling our traffic like they did to every brand page. And I had no idea how to replace that traffic organically. Our website load time was terrible because I don't have a technical background. I don't know how to look in the back end and see how I can fix anything. So what do? All I had was a hammer, right? I couldn't write my way out of these problems. So my advice to myself would be, being a great writer does not make you a great content marketer. You have to have a full understanding of how people discover your content and make that path of discovery the focus.
And this has been a really amazing interview, bringing a really interesting edge to our series of episodes that we have here with SaaS companies. So Ben, really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your story, and thanks for being part of the show today.
My pleasure. Please follow me on LinkedIn if you're a content marketer or you're just interested in this stuff. Search for Ben Goldstein. I'm the guy holding the dog. Visit nutshell.com. Nutshell.com/blog. Accept the browser notification at the top. That's actually really helpful for us. And before we leave, I just want to shout out my wife, who is the hardest working woman in show business. Bye, baby.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ben.